Where were we? Some notalwaysright.com stories that I don't have time to read. And Bathtub Fantasy and more. That's good. I'm here. Ezekiel Kralen's ongoing story about the two dogs and the people who live outside in the street and come around and yell up at his window to make him come down and plug in their devices and charge them up for them, and the other people in the street and the people who come in the apartment, and he has arguments with them about things or watches them be taken out to a ambulance and driven away and wonders about that, and trying to find the beginning of this. Bathtub Fantasy and more. Ezekiel Kralen wrote. Email correspondence March 11th to March 16th. Subject, 6 doggy sweaters instead of 4. Part 2 of 2 continued. Date March 11th. So if you step into this building again, I won't hesitate to sick the cops on you. Just who the fuck do you think you are, Vince, to talk like that? You're out of control. Now, I must note at this point, good physician, he's absolutely no danger. He's a scrawny little thing, about 5'4", and his belligerence was of the mild sort. His main gripe was that he doesn't get to see me anymore, upon which I reminded him we exchanged emails and phone numbers in the past, but it was he who didn't contact me back, and there's no way I can afford surprise visits by anyone, including yelling up at my window. I'm just too busy for any of that nonsense. So he requested my email and number again, but I said, nope, not going to happen. I learned my lesson last time around. You dropped by once when I was camped outside with the pups, I reminded the fool. That was fine, but since the homeless sweep, I can't do that anymore. You're welcome to hang with me whenever you see me outside with the dogs, which I still do from time to time, though without a tent. Homeless sweep, he queried. Oh, glob, I thought. Doesn't the idiot know anything about what's going on around him? He's in his own world of crystal palaces and booze-gushing fountains, and all this exhausted pilgrim wanted was to return hovel, enjoy my dinner in peace, and crash out. Geez Louise. Nonetheless, in spite of my growling tummy, I took the time to fill him in on the sweep, but just before I did that, who should walk by with a nod of the head, then enter the building? Scooter! At least he had the good sense to not intrude, yet another wackadoodle dopehead, so now I got 3 of them imposing their unsavory selves in my world, though I make exception for just one, thanks to the wee hounds. Somehow, some way, I finally extricated myself from Vince's tentacles a few minutes later, wishing him well as he did same, and got down to supper and bed. Now, for a final thought, Scooter grabbed those smelling salts. Could Carlson actually be dead, chopped up there in his own bathtub, and Scooter's just covering his butt by talking with me to fabricate an alibi? And who is this strapping blonde dude of careworn animal magnetism, smoky bedroom eyes, solid jawline, and impressive biceps, pectorals, and solid rump, who accompanied him into the building and, I guess, Carlson's apartment? Are they busy decomposing the body parts with lime and some other substance to conceal the foul stink of decay? They certainly have the advantage of an absent building manager to get away with glob-only nose. Maybe I should ask Victor, our maintenance man, to take a look-see in that unit after telling him my concern. That would be a hoot. Meanwhile, I think I'll jack off tonight in some hot Criminal Minds fantasy with Blondie, boinking him up his tight sphincter while he's bent over the bathtub, bubbling with dissolving flesh and muscle, one eyeball still floating about. P.S. Barely an hour after I composed the paragraph above, I stepped out to empty my wastebasket when who should I see exiting Carlson's pad? Scooter and Blondie. I feigned a friendly hello and slipped through the back porch door to empty the basket. They were already gone when I stepped back out seconds later and returned to my humble refuge. P.P.S. The next day, Thursday Eve, who should come lumbering up the stairs, gasping for breath, but Carlson. Shortly followed by Scooter, though neither spotted me as I hid around the corner of the side hall while they drifted along toward their abode across from where Adisa and Mom once lived, and vanished like the eerie spooks they are, so much for my cold-blooded, senicide speculation. Sigh. P.P.P.S. Yesterday afternoon, my missing 4 slices of Swiss cheese magically showed up again in my fridge right where I left them before they disappeared, and in perfectly edible condition. Will wonders never cease? My poltergeist theory must have holes in it. Re 6 Donkey Sweaters Instead of 4, Part 2 of 2, date March 12. Watson wrote, "These 2 letters are some fine storytelling." I replied, "Thanks, so glad you enjoyed them. I had a hell of a time composing Part 2 as I got stuck on just how I can unravel Vince's meth-crazed litany of bullshit, so I just let go of it for a day and a half, trusting my inner demons to bring things to the prefrontal lobe before, and they finally did. Sometimes an author needs to mull a scene over for a considerable time before putting it to pen. This is not writer's block, which I never suffer anymore, but the creative process doing its thing. The real writer's block is angst, and I've gotten very good at dissipating it promptly, thanks to dealing with Deke's frequent hissy fits over many years." Watson wrote, "I'm seriously impressed by how you stood up to Vince, and you hit some great licks. Quote, he's in his own world of ice palaces and booze-gushing fountains." I replied, "Thanks. I changed ice to crystal because it rolls better, and I think fewer readers will get the meth reference with ice than they would with crystal." Watson wrote, "And when Carlson comes huffing and puffing up the stairs right after your fantasy about chunks of his corpse dissolving in the bathtub," I replied, "You just can't make this stuff up. It happened exactly that way, in exactly that time frame. Just another hint they're all having fun at my expense, as my bodhisattva premise suggests, and I had so much fun composing that torrid, not the same thing at all, torrid sex crime scene with your alter ego Morticia in mind. Imagine when my tales are reproduced in vibrant animation via indie media. Marshall did a great job narrating my latest tale last Friday. More on that later, along with a couple more updates. Hard to keep up whenever I go through an intense cycle of flapdoodle. I make sure, though, to draft a quick outline each day so I won't lose any scenes to the dusty void of forgotten props in a defunct theater from yesteryear, its roof about to collapse. All the world's a stage, but most of the shows are canceled or never make it to the boards in the first place." Subject: Catching up with Deke updates and other reports, date March 16th, starting with Thursday morning 6 days ago. Heimdall. Stepping out of Rosenberg's with Java in hand, who should I see down the block a bit but someone in a plush hooded jacket smiling at me? Took me a few moments to realize who it was. Heimdall, Deke's Viking friend, who sold him a fabulous Bluetooth speaker at a ridiculously low price back in January. So glad to see him again. I invited him to sit with me around the corner by the steps of Max Muscle, that nutritional sports outlet, though he remained standing for the entire visit, which lasted for almost a half hour. It was a superb get-together. He was nicely dressed as usual, this time in a nylon shell jacket of a tawny shade, black Levi jeans, and a pair of dark blue Adidas sneakers with 3 yellow stripes on each side that looked spanking new like everything else he wears. I never see him without a Bluetooth speaker of his own, usually hanging from a strap slung diagonally over his chest and one shoulder, and that morning was no exception. This one was a JBL Extreme 2, barrel-shaped and resting just above his waist, definitely a music lover, though with a much wider range of genres than Deke's. Thank the elder god Oryx for that, and also, unlike Deke at times, it was turned off, so our confabulation was an undisturbed pleasure. What did we talk about? You may be asking at this point, Watson. It was mostly about the different people we meet on the streets and how we deal with conflicts from the nasty, dysfunctional types. His approach is much like mine. Always be calm, patient, and forgiving, no matter how onerous the other's behavior. At worst, just walk away and never be vengeful or harbor resentment. But I already knew that about him, so well illustrated by his witnessing my chastising Deke in front of him. That night, Heimdall agreed to a $200 transaction for a $500 speaker. I'll spare you the details of this argument, as I've already spelled them out in a previous missive, my point being that Heimdall remained peaceable and friendly during my little clash with the Cajun doofus, and did not at all express dismay later on at Deke's reckless treatment of that fine speaker leading up to its demise only a few weeks later. The only complaint against Heimdall has about him is that when he's around him, Deke never shuts up but chatters on aimlessly. He loves the pups, though, and agrees with me that Deke is basically a decent human being and is a great help to others surviving on the streets. He also brought up his living situation, though in such a way that I'm not clear about whether or not he has a roof over his head now. He said he comes from money, but enjoys many aspects of the street life and has a studio apartment ready for him in the near future, thanks to a social worker. I'm under the impression he has some safe place to return to at night, considering how well attired and impeccably neat his appearance every time I see him. Not to mention the 2 expensive smartphones he always carries around, along with a high-priced speaker that changes brand or model with surprising frequency. His affirmation of my bodhisattva premise, as conveyed by how he deals with conflict, was most uplifting, especially since it was just the night before, when pesky Vince showed up with his disturbing antics that put me in a slump, worrying if he's going to be more of a pest these days and how I'm going to deal with that. It's not like I discussed my premise with Heimdall, seeking approval from anyone. It's more like he appeared out of the sky as one of my guardians to give me the perfect boost at just the right time that came before which I could comprehend. In sum, thanks to our upbeat conversation, I felt invigorated and still do. For just under my thin veneer of angst, I discovered renewed energy, a positive rush of affirmation that I'm still basking in as I compose this email. To be continued.